Um, Welcome to this session of the Dataeuropa Academy this morning. And today we want to talk about what is data quality and metadata quality. And we do this to get your feeling on how can you improve on metadata quality and data quality. And we do this also aligned on the publication of the data quality guidelines. Before we start, a little introduction to our team. So this Dataeuropa.eu Academy is organized by Esther Hür and Laura van Klippenberg. And my name is Benjamin Dittrad. I'm here together with my colleague Lina Bruns. We are from Fraunhofer Focus. We are also working on Data.europa.eu more from the technical side. And today we can give you this training about data quality and metadata quality. And also we are co-authors of the data quality guidelines, which will be also introduced today. So also before we start, a little agenda for today. We are currently in the opening session. Shortly, we will go into and talk about what is data quality, why it's good, maybe. So once we learn something about that, metadata quality and data quality, you might want to know what can Data.europa.eu do for yourself to apply what you've learned. After that, we will have a little break. Then we will talk about how to improve the data quality. This is also the topic where we go into more details of the data quality guidelines. And then lately we will close with a question and answer session, a little recap, and we ask you later to give us some feedback. So, but before we go into our session today, just some rules of today. So, as you know, this will be recorded. Please mute yourself. Of course, you might have questions. You can use Slido for that. We will show you a link shortly on how to use it. And we will also reserve after each topic a couple of minutes where we can go through your questions. Depends on how many questions that are. You can rank the questions all, and we will prioritize how they are ranked. And please reserve some time. So we prepared a feedback survey at the end. There is a QR code, so please have your smartphone or whatever device besides you that you can scan this code and give us some feedback, which helps us to improve the training we give in the future and to learn what we did today. So a little word about Slido. We will use this for two little interactive sessions. One will start very soon. And of course, as I said, you can provide your questions there, and we will monitor this. And always, when the topic is finished, we will have time to answer your questions. If you go on Slido, it's sli.do, as you see on the screenshot. Please type in the word data minus quality, and then you will get to the area of Slido where you can ask the questions or participate also in the interactive sessions. So for now, I will give you a couple of seconds to prepare your Slido area. And after that, we will jump into our first interactive session. Okay, let's go on. And for the first part, Lina will take over.
Yes, thank you, Benjamin. Yeah, as you just said before we start explaining what data quality is, we want to hear your thoughts on the topic. So we kindly ask you to go to Slido. Maybe then you can move to the next slide so we can see that. Exactly. So please go to Slido. At the very top, you can find a tab which is named Polls, and there you should now see the exercise. Please name 3 words you associate with data quality. And I can see that the first words are already arriving, so that's great. Let's maybe wait for 1 or 2 minutes. Okay, this looks really good. I see that already 26% have voted. Okay, awesome. We already got a lot of different answers, which is really good. So I can tell you that the word which was mostly typed in was reliability. So 12 people typed in reliability, but we also have accuracy, consistency, trust and structure and analysis, completeness, and lots of other different words. So this is actually exactly the answers we expected, and we are very happy about that because it already shows that data quality is a very broad topic with many different aspects. And this is also a lesson we want you to learn today, but we will come back to that in a minute. So thank you very much for your participation in this. I think we can now go on to the next slide and start with why data quality is actually important. And as you can see from this slide, we see two major aspects. Of course, there are other aspects as well. So there are lots of reasons why data quality is important, but to break it down, we see two major points. So first of all, improved data quality leads to better decision-making across an organization. So this means the more high quality data you have, the more confidence you can have in your decision. So, and the other thing, especially when we are talking about public administration and open data, it's the reuse of data. So as you all know, in Europe, the Open Data and PSI directive is the horizontal legal basis for open data. And because we have this legal basis, public administrations have to publish their data. But open data can only be fruitful if the data is of high quality. So just imagine that there is a data user, for example, an interested developer who finds data on Data.europa.eu, but he sees that the data is of low quality and he has to invest a lot of effort to manually enhance the data, or maybe he just doesn't even understand the data at all. So he quickly decides, well, I'm not going to use the data. And then the whole data publishing would have been for nothing, actually. So the reuse of data is really important. And in order to enable the reuse, data quality is needed. And also this is quite interesting because we found that open data is often reused by public administrations themselves. So they can profit directly from very good data quality. So Ben, if you move to the next slide, we will now try to answer the question what data quality actually is. So as when you are still at the tech cloud in Slido, you can see that there are lots of different answers. And actually, there is no common definition of what quality is or what data quality is or metadata quality. But there is a lot of rich literature about this topic, and we can find very different dimension indicators and metrics. And we now try to give you an overview of the most important dimension and indicators. But please keep in mind that this list is not, it's not everything. So there might be other indicators as well. So the dimensions we would like to talk about today are findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. Some of you might notice these dimensions already because they are the FAIR principles. So the FAIR principles are all about making your data as findable, as accessible, interoperable, and reusable as possible. And we also see in our tech cloud in Slido that some of those were already mentioned by you. So this is awesome. So now we can have a look at the indicators. So each dimensions come with different indicators. Maybe Ben, if you just go ahead, thank you. We have the indicator completeness and findability in the dimension findability. So we do not go into detail on each indicator. I just give you 1 or 2 sentences so that you can imagine what is meant by each indicator. So completeness, just imagine that you have a data set which lacks a title or which lacks a description. So it would be hard to find. So this is why completely directly has an effect on the findability. And behind the indicator findability, there you can find something like assigning keywords or categories to your data set in order to make it better findable for data users on a data portal such as Data.europa.eu. Then we have the dimension accessibility. There we have one indicator, it's named accessibility and availability. So for accessibility, just imagine that you found a very nice data set on Data.europa.eu, but when you try to click on the respective resource, for example, a CSV file, you will get an error, something like 404, the file cannot be found or something like that. So then you would have a quality issue regarding the accessibility. And same for the availability. So if you imagine that you found a very nice data set 2 weeks ago, and you want to reopen it today and it's not there anymore, then you will have a quality issue regarding the availability. So for interoperability, there we have 3 indicators. We have conformity and compliance. So this is the question whether your data is compliant to standards. For example, when it contains date or time information, there's an ISO standard you should use. It's a question about the openness of your data. So what kind of file format are you using? Is it a proprietary format or an open format? And regarding the machine readability, again, it's a question of file format. There are some formats which are totally machine readable and in the sense of open data should be recommended to be used. And other file formats are not machine readable at all, so they should not be used. And last but not least, we have reusability. There we have quite a lot of different indicators. And again, some of them were already mentioned by you in the Tech Cloud at the beginning. So it's a question about how timely is your data, how consistent is it accurate? This means, does it describe the data, so the real world, in a sense that really is that how it really is. So you should try to be most accurate when having your data. And a question of understandability. So just imagine that a data user does not know your data at all, but still he should be able to understand what it's about. And a question of credibility. This is regarding to the data publisher. Is it a credible institution or is it not? So maybe you can move on to the next slide. If you now worry how to ever be able to fulfill all these indicators, please do not worry at all. You don't have to fulfill them all in the same depth. So data quality is more a construct. It's about the fitness of data for use. So it's rather a subjective question, and it depends on the use case which indicators are actually relevant. So let's move to the data user perspective. If you want, as a data user, to build an application for a time schedule or for public transport, you really need timely data. So basically, you need real-time data. So you have a really high requirement regarding the timeliness of data. On the other hand, if you want to build an app for a virtual exhibition, you would need historical data. And this data does not need to be timely at all. You would rather need very accurate data when you want to use it to describe ancient exhibits. So there you can see data quality is quite subjective, and it depends on what the data user wants to do with the data. So let's move on to the next slide. Here we can see that quality actually applies to metadata and data as well. If you do not have a very technical background, this might be a bit difficult to differentiate. So we have some examples. We use an analogy of a book. So if you just imagine a book, the metadata of the book would be something like the author, the publication year, the title, maybe also the cover and the format of the cover. And if you refer to the actual content of the book, this would be the data. If you think it through, this analogy is not perfect, but I think it suits our matter here. So if you are having a look at the metadata, there are different quality issues which might occur. For example, the title of the book is not understandable. For you, it just doesn't make any sense. So you would have a quality issue with the metadata. The same applies when there's no description of the book given. Maybe the author is unknown or the publication year is not given. So this would also make it very hard for you to find this book in a bookstore if there is no description, no author, no publication year, and maybe the title is not even understandable or not precise enough. Another issue would be that it is an unusual format and somehow it's really hard to read it because you cannot hold it in your hand. So these would be kind of quality issues which can occur within your metadata. Regarding the data, quality issues would be like you're not able to open the book. Somehow it is sticky or has some glue or whatever, so you cannot open it. Or maybe there are missing pages or words. So if you're thinking on a CSV or Excel file, sometimes you have cells with no values in it. So these would be our missing pages or words. Or maybe it's written in a foreign language, or you have some struggles with UTF-8 and it contains unknown letters and words and somehow looks really strange and you cannot make sense out of it. Or maybe the content is outdated. There would be a quality issue regarding the timeliness of the data. So you can see quality issues can both apply to metadata and data as well. Now the question is, what can you actually do in order to increase your data or metadata quality? We see basically 3 steps you can do. So the first one would be to introduce processes. You could start establishing standardized processes in your organization and introduce quality assurance routines. Or maybe you can start introducing a data management process to make it easier for your employees to follow, for example, a checklist and go through each indicator and check whether the data fulfills it or not. And you should definitely define responsibilities. So maybe you already have data stewards who are in charge of the quality of the respective data set. If you do not have that, you should start to define those responsibilities. Next, you could also make use of tooling. For example, there are tools for automatically anonymizations of data sets or other tools who could perform automatic quality checks. For example, maybe you have heard of CSV Lint, which is an online browser tool free of charge where you can check your CSV or better say the structure of your CSV, whether it is correct or not. And last, of course, you should acquire competencies. So in your organization, if you want data quality to be fulfilled, employees need actually the concrete knowledge first on what data quality actually is and how it can be achieved. And for this, we have published the data quality guidelines, but we will come back to this point in the second part of the presentation. So next, we would like to show you an example process. So we call it the data preparation process. And this process consists of 6 steps and is an example process which you could run through before publishing your data in order to make it of more high quality. So this process starts with the first phase called profiling. which is actually about discovering and understanding your data and seeing what kind of value this data has. So this phase actually has nothing to do with data quality, it's just the first step. So in the next step, it's called the distilling phase. You are starting to refining and structuring and cleansing your data. For example, you should use in this phase anonymization tools in order to delete any personal content. So in the next phase, it's called the enriching phase. You can start enriching your data or augmenting your data, for example, by linking data from external sources to the existing data set. Next, it's about the documentation. So you should start to document the data usage or recommendations on how to use the data. And also this is where versioning comes in. You should also document the versioning. And then in the next phase, we have the validating phase. There you actually assess the data quality. So you have a look, is your data findable? Is it accessible? Is it interoperable and reusable? And in the end, it's about the publication. This is the phase where you publish your data in an open and machine readable format. So this is the data preparation process, just introduced very quickly. Later in the data quality guidelines, you will find more information about that. Okay, then we now have a short break in order to answer your questions. So if there are any questions, please use Slido. Switch to the tab questions, I think Q&A, if I'm not wrong. And just type down your question if there are any. You just wait for a couple of minutes. So right now there are no questions, but let's see if something comes up. Okay, there's the first question. Can we have the slides after? Yes, sure, you will get the slides. Then there's another question concerning the different indicators for assessing data quality. Is credibility the same as reliability? I would say it depends on your personal view of those of the definition of both. From my point of view, reliability is something which occurs more for data. So is the data reliable? And credibility is more something regarding the data publisher. So it goes more in the direction of the metadata. So is it a credible institution or not? But also I would say there is not a very huge difference between both. One question is, which are the tools to anonymize or check the CSV structure? This is also this can be found in the data quality guidelines. So later on, we will provide the link for you. It's a PDF, and there you can find all the tools with a description and also a link, and you can just click on it and try it yourself. So then there is one question, how do you apply the quality dimension to data itself? Well, the quality dimension, it's more of a theoretical construct or structure in order to give a structure for the different indicators. So basically it's the indicators which you apply to the data by using metrics. So now it's getting really complicated. Metrics are what are used in order to measure the data quality for an respective indicator. And the dimension themselves, they are just an overlaying construct for giving a certain structure. So you do not apply the dimension themselves to the data. So then there's one question, are there EU official documents or guidelines for public sector about the data quality? So now there are the data quality guidelines. As I just said, you will get the link later on. I'm not sure if there are other official EU documents on that topic. If someone knows the answer, please go ahead. One question is about whether we have a list of best practices covering different areas of data management. Yes, and they are part of the data quality guidelines. So you will see later on that we provide hands-on examples, good examples and bad examples on how to apply the different steps during the process. Another interesting question is to what extent the indicators to assess data quality can be quantified if they can. Basically, most of the indicators can be quantified. There are just a few which rely on the perspective of the data user, which cannot be quantified. In the next section, we will talk about the MQA, so the Meta Quality Assurance in the Dataeuropa.eu, and you will see how the indicators are used there. They are working with a scoring, so they are quantified. And also in the data quality guidelines, you can find at the very end a big table, and there are all indicators and metrics listed, and you can see whether they are quantified or not. Okay, one question about the data governance. Well, the data governance was not part of the data preparation process. It's more of a strategic topic, which you should apply in your organization. And I think regarding the data governance, one could make an own training because there's so much to tell about that. I just mentioned it that it would be really good, to have some data steward and to define responsibilities for the data quality. So this goes in the direction of data governance, but the topic is so broad. I think we will not have the time to go much into detail on that. So here is one question. What is the relation between metadata and data quality? In other words, what is the impact of bad metadata quality, even if the data is of high quality? Well, this is something which goes especially in the direction of the dimension findability. So findability is about making your data findable. And this is something which you can do about the metadata. So metadata is information about the data, and you can use the metadata in order to make your data findable. If the metadata is now of low quality, it is really hard for data users to find your data. So in the end, metadata quality might cause that your data is not being reused at all. So this is why we emphasize that that quality also applies to metadata. So make sure that your metadata is always of high quality. Then you will get a better scoring in the MQA and Dataeuropa.eu. And you will ensure that data users are able to find your data. So one question, if we could provide some documents with more details about the individual steps of the metadata quality process shown in the slide, you will find some detailed information about the processes in the data quality guidelines. I do not personally have another document where it is explained in detail, or I do not know of other documents, but maybe a quick Google search for a data preparation process could help here. But as I said, you will find some more information in the quality guidelines. Then there's one question: do you have a list of metrics for quantifying the data quality, not the metadata? This was also part of the data quality guidelines. So we were having a look at very different metrics, and I think you can find them also in the appendix of the data quality guidelines. And there you can also see in this table whether the respective metric applies to metadata or to data. So I think most of them apply rather to metadata than to data, but there are still some metrics which can be used in order to assess the quality of data. Okay, so there are still some questions, but I think we are running a bit out of time. So maybe we can come back to them later on, because we reserved some time at the end of the training for open questions. But now I would say, Ben, we will go on with the presentation.
Okay, sure. So thanks a lot for your questions. My screen is getting okay. Yeah, as we just learned about that, we have quality on data and we have quality on metadata. So this session now, right, what we have now is focusing on the quality of metadata. And there's something on Data.europa.eu that can help you to identify what is the metadata of, if you're, as your data providers, what is the metadata quality of all the data sets you've provided. And this feature or application is called the MQA, so the Metadata Quality Assurance. But before I dive into what the MQA does, I need to give you a little introduction to dkdap. So dkdap is a specification from the European Commission that specifies how to describe data of the public sector. And I don't want to deep dive into dkdap, just a first concepts of dkdap. So the concept of a catalog. A catalog is basically a collection that holds data sets. So you can assume that most publishers or data providers are represented on Data.europa.eu are also considered as a catalog. This does not apply to all. So for national portals, it's maybe a bit different. Their one national portal is considered as a catalog, and for EU institution publishers, they are all considered as each of those as a single catalog. And of course, a catalog can consist of multiple data sets. In this example, we have a catalog which has 2 data sets. And the dataset is not the CSV or Excel file or XML file itself. It's rather a description of those. So the dataset tells me what is the title of the dataset, describes what the dataset is about. Probably it's also describing who is the publisher. So and then in those datasets attached, we have another concept, and this is called the distribution. And the distribution is actually that kind of snippet in the data set that tells me where to find the data. Where is the CSV file represented by a URL and a link? Where's the XML file? And it doesn't have to be files. There can also be an endpoint for an API and so on. And the distribution also tells me if there is license applied. So it tells me what I'm allowed to do in which circumstances with the data set at hand. This should be enough for now. There's more, and it's a bit more complex, but to give you a picture what we're talking about, we have the catalog, the data set, and for each data set, some or more distributions. So if we now look at the MQA and narrow down this picture a bit, that we say we have the data set, and we just learned the data set is describing the data itself. So it gives me an idea what is the data about. And if we talk about the MQA, we also have kind of MQA information, MQA data. And the MQA data is not describing the data set, but the MQA data is holding information about the metadata quality of the data set. So does it provide a title? Yes, no. Does it provide a description? Yes or no. Does it provide an URL where I can find the data? Yes or no. And if I want to access the data, can I do this? What is the status there? So is it not findable? Is it all fine? Or do I need a permission to access this? Is the license information applied? Yes and no. And is this a known license? So is this license coming from a controlled vocabulary, which is a moderated list of accepted vocabularies? For example, is this data machine readable or not? So this is all stored in the MQA data. And what we did on Dataeuropa, we tied those two together. So each data set has tied with it the MQA data. So based on this, we can then do some measurements and present you for each data set and for all distributions, for all catalogs, and all data sets on the portal, what is the metadata quality. And this is our last slide on this technical excursus. How does it work on Dataeuropa to get from this raw data into something that is usable on the portal and which might help you to improve your metadata quality? So we have these data sets, but this we already talked about. We do not need right now. So based on the data sets we have analyzed, we've created this MQA data. So to say the sidecar of the data sets, which consists of all the information I just talked about. So basically, is there a title? Yes, no, and so on. And then we have the MQA component. And we need to do something to get this raw data to make it visible. So what the MQA does, regularly it scans all the MQA site data and calculates the score. So for each of the indicators I just mentioned, there's a matrix and it calculates the score. So if there's a title given, it gives you some points. If the distribution or the link, the URL to the real data is accessible, it gives you points. If there is license given, you can gain some points. And so on, this gets calculated, and then each catalog will receive a certain number of points. And those points are later mapped to a rating, so it's not so good, sufficient, good, and excellent. These are basically these quality scores you receive then on the portal. And now we can see how this is looking and helping you on EU data, on Dataeuropa.eu. So if we go on the portal on the start page of Dataeuropa.eu, you can find in the data section the metadata quality link. And if you go there, you will see a page like this. And on the top, you can see that you are currently on the dashboard of the global dashboard. So whatever you see on this page right now is applied or is for the whole portal about an aggregation about all catalogs and all data sets. But you might also want to see how is my catalog comparing or in sense of metadata quality. This you can also do. I will show you shortly. And besides the catalogs, we also have the methodology page. So everything I'm talking right now about and which we see later in this presentation is about MQA and how we measure metadata quality is all written down as in detail on the methodology page. And of course, if you like, you can get all the MQA information downloaded as report, for example, as a PDF file. And below, you can see the dimension cards. So they should sound familiar with you, except for the contextuality dimension. This is something we will do in the future. So to distribute this and merge this right now into right into the fair dimensions, but all the others are the fair dimensions. They are quite important, and therefore I will go there a bit into detail. First, we have this rating. I just talked about. It's a representation of the points. In this case, as I said, for the complete portal, but you can also see this for each catalog dedicated. If you would click on this tile or card, you could see an evolution of this rating. So from on a timely basis. So because we track from time, as I said, the MQA is regularly updating its data, and then we always store the past, and you can see how this evolves over time. Right now, the overall rating is sufficient, which doesn't sound so good, but as we started, it was bad. So we see an improvement already here, which is very good. So if we now go to the other dimensions, I don't want to explain everything here because we don't have the time, but if you would have a look at the methodology, of course, you can read it there and how it's measured and what it's about. For example, if you look at machine readable, this tells us about the complete portal. The data sets has 59% of the data sets have at least one distribution that is machine readable, which is, there's quite some room for improvement. If we go on findability, we can see that 80% of the data set has at least one category assigned. So for the categories in Data.europa.eu, we use the data theme of the Eurovoc. Those are applied here to the categories if given by the data set. For example, if we go to contextuality, we see that of the distributions, only 13% of the distributions have a given modification date. So that tells me when was this data lastly updated latest. In the accessibility, this is quite interesting, and it's very good what we see here. So what the MQA does, it always checks if the data that is linked to a data set or distribution is really accessible. So for each data set, we try all URLs if they are accessible or not. And we store what we receive. So we do not store the data itself, but we store, in this case, it's accessible and it's good. And what this line is telling us, most of the data sets, links and distributions are accessible. So which is really good. We will see this in a more detail later today. And if we look on reusability, we can see that, yeah, most 69% of the distributions has license given, which is very important because only with license I can know what I'm capable of doing or allowed to do with this data set. So, but let's say this is the general overview, but you're interested in to see how your catalog performs. For example, I would like to look for the European Maritime Safety Agency. And therefore, I would type in the search term safety when I'm on the catalog search pages on the MQA. And then I will find this catalog. I can click on it and I will come to a page very similar to what we just saw. So you already find the dimensions here again, but this time they are applied or they are only for the selected catalog. But I can see something more. I can see I'm on the catalog dashboard, but I can also see that there are certain distribution accessibility issues. So if I look again on the accessibility dimension, I can see, yes, most of the distributions are accessible, but maybe not all. So now I can see there are 26 issues. If I would click on this button, I will get a detailed view on what are the issues and which distributions are affected by those issues. So this is the first indicator to help me, what can I improve? And of course, I can see the dkdap schema violations. So what the MQA also does, it does for each data set a dkdap compliance check. And here we can see there are 317 issues with schema violations. Here we have to say, and you might already looked at the interoperability dimension and see that dkdap compliant here is 0%. Currently, it is very hard to achieve completely compliance to dkdap. This is another topic, and this is something that is worked on. It's actually not only working on Dataeuropa that needs to be done to be compliant here. This is an overall work with many stakeholders that we improve this and that data providers can also be compliant to dkdap. So now we looked on the catalog view, but maybe this view is still too high. So you want to look on a specific data set and see what is the quality there. This is also possible. So you go on Data.europa.eu, search for a data set, and click on this data set, and now you're on the dataset details page. There you can see the title, its description, the distributions, and all those meta information. But now you want to see what is the quality, the metadata quality of this particular data set. So therefore, we have in this so-called action bar the quality link or the quality tab. And if you click into it, you again see a very similar page. You see again the dimensions, but those are now only for this data set. And here we can give you a bit more details. For example, if you again look on the accessibility, you see that the status code 200, which means the URL resolves and you get the file potentially you want, is by 89%. And there are 11% of files or whatever that cannot be accessed because it's 404, and that tells me this wasn't found. This is not available anymore. We do not know the reason. So from Data.europa.eu perspective, we do not know the reason. We can just record that this is not found, this is not available, and this is for you to have a look at and to see what's not going on right there. So we can see this information for all the dimensions we already talked about. But if I would scroll down on the same page, I can see this information also for the distributions. And here I can see all distributions that are provided by this data set. And for example, I opened up one here. And if I look on accessibility for this particular distribution of this data set, we see that the status code is 404, which tells me this particular distribution cannot be reached. So and this would be one approach now, that we can start enhancing this and see why is this not accessible, and maybe make this distribution or this file accessible again. This is only the UI. So if you're interested, of course, everything you see here comes from an API, and this API is published. You can see the link in the bottom of the slide. There's also a description of the API, so whoever wants to use it can use it and build its own MQA or UI on that and make its own measurements. It's all possible. And this concludes the MQA session. Sure, there's a bit more, and now we have time to ask questions. Again, we will wait a bit and give you time to ask your questions.
So there was actually already one hint coming in during you were talking, Ben. So someone said that in Data.europa.eu, a description of the data quality is attached to each Eurostat data set. So this is not a question, it's a statement.
And that statement is right. And also to all other so yeah, as I said, to all data sets, there's a quality measurement attached. But does the question or does the statement maybe mean that the Eurostat data already comes with attached quality measurements?
I'm not
so
sure.
Far we
maybe
don't consider this.
Yeah, maybe the person who wrote this can clarify on it.
Yeah, this would be interesting. So maybe for those who know, while you're typing maybe your questions. We store the quality data as DQB data, which is the data quality vocabulary, which is also a specified standard from the World Wide Web Consortium. So we have the specification for dkdap for using for describing data, and we also use a standard for describing the metadata quality and attaching this to the data.
Okay, now we got a clarification for the Eurostat data. It's not a measure, it's a text description. So I think they added a further textual description regarding the data quality.
Thanks a lot. That's interesting.
We can wait some more minutes for further questions. In the meantime, I can start answer some of the other questions we received before. There's one question regarding the metrics. The person says that he or she knows about ISO standards, about data quality and its measures, and asked whether we took these ISO standards into account. Well, all dimension and indicators we mentioned come from a literature review we performed. And in this literature review, we also took into account the 25 or 12 ISO standard. So yes, we took it into account. Now we got a new question regarding most frequent access URL. It is sometimes a number and others a percentage. In the first case, how to understand if the number represents a good performance?
Yes, I will go one slide back and maybe you see the percentage here. Yeah, so what means the number? Maybe some feedback for improvement on our side to give you an explanation on what the number is, because right now it makes the assumption you know what the number is about. But the most common here is 200 and 404. So 200 says all fine, and 404 says there's an issue, this resource or this what you are looking for is not found. And the other part of the question is also very good, because what you see here is a data set that has multiple distributions or multiple URLs attached to it. And in this view, we say, if we look on the accessibility, most frequent access URL status codes, it says that 89% of the URLs given as a access URL of this data set are okay because it provides 200. And this is aggregated for all the distributions of this particular data set. On this page, we are still looking on the same data set, but now we are looking just on only one distribution. So, and there we can say this distribution has the status code 404. I hope this makes it a bit clearer.
And then we have one, I'm just reading, sorry. We have one participant in the chat who said, we are creating confusion because speaking of metadata in general, but in reality, you are analyzing only the metadata used to describe a data resource on the open data portal. But there are other important metadata that apply to the different levels of data granularity. For example, metadata for single data cells, metadata about indicators, variables, definition, metadata about the data processing, etc. So when we are talking about metadata, we always mean the metadata you produce in order to publish data on an open data portal. Maybe Ben, if you want to add something.
Yeah, this is only what we can do. We can only measure on those data that is provided. And what is provided or what can be provided to the portal is determined by or specified by dkdap. And this is very good because you also Data.europa.eu is an aggregation portal for national portals, for projects, for EU institutions, and therefore we have this common view on metadata, which is then called dkdap. And based on what is provided, we can do the measurements. So we do not say, and this is also mentioned in the methodology, we do not say this is a guidebook for metadata quality, and this is absolutely everything you need to know. This is a perspective that Data.europa.eu can have.
Okay, thanks. There may be another question. How is the rating score computed? Which kind of composite indicator methodology is used?
We will see a bit more of those things later today. It's in detail written in the methodology page, but we will see snippets of those methodology page today. So we can see, I can broadly say that, roughly say that each dimension is represented by kind of a table in this methodology page, and each indicator has applied a certain set of numbers or points that are given if this indicator is fulfilled, or the metrics of this indicator is fulfilled. But we will see some of those tables later today.
Another question, how do you encode the dashboard values with DQV, data quality vocabulary properties?
Yes, we do it with DQV, and we store it in a triple store directly. And if you're interested to see how this looks like, go back again. And now let's have a look on the right side and on the top level menu. So where you see dataset, categories, similar datasets, and quality. You see this on the left side. And if you look on the right side, the second from the right is DQV data. So for each dataset, you can download a linked data representation on the DQV data that is describing this dataset in DQV. So we provide this for each dataset.
Another question, do you analyze also the quality of documentation resources provided as a particular distribution type?
So we analyze all the metadata. Yes, but and if this is provided as such, then of course, we do not look into the data. I hope I got this question right. If not, please rephrase it.
Then we have two questions which actually go into the same direction. It's whether the MQA considers also user satisfaction of those metadata. And to ensure intrinsic quality of metadata. For example, if the MQA says there's a title or there's not a title, but how to assess if the title is clear or the translation is correct from a user's point of view.
So, which is a very good point, and no, we don't do this. So we have no user input on that, and what we do on the measurements is only what we receive from the data providers.
Maybe another interesting question, so what entities could make use of the Data.europa.eu's MQA tool? Because you were saying that the tool can be also used. The APA is free.
So basically everyone who is interested. So it may be that the MQA is not providing this information as you would like to have it. And, or maybe, so from a decision-making perspective, you're looking on this and saying, or our metadata quality is not as good as I would like to have it on Data.europa.eu. We need to do something. So then the API can be used, for example, by your development team to get a particular view. They don't have to build an application out of it, but to get a particular view scope down for your needs how you can best improve your data quality. So this goes also a bit deeper. So we have this aggregated data in the API we showed you, but we also have this triple store where all this DQB data, so the MQA data, is stored. And this can also be analyzed. So a development team could develop a dashboard directly for your data sets in a way that you can introduce this to your teams, and they exactly get to know how to improve the metadata quality.
Okay, and then we have one last question regarding spatial data. So one person presumes that Dataeuropa.eu transforms metadata from GeoStandard into dkdap. If this is correct, is the quality measured on dkdap metadata?
So it's transformed to GeoDKDap, and we're looking at the data quality, the metadata quality, only at dkdap. This is so we do look if there is a spatial data applied to a data set, but this is different to GeoDKDap. This spatial data applied to data sets goes in the direction of findability. It just gives me another option to look for data. So this is considered, but this is a dkdap property.
Okay, great. So I think as we are already a bit over time, we now go into the break and then start with the next section in 5 minutes, and questions which are unanswered right now, we try to answer at the end of the session. Okay, so welcome back. The 5 minutes are over and we are now going to continue. But before we go on to the next section, there was one other question regarding the metadata, and we think it would make sense to answer it already now. So there was a question in the chat and also in Slido, what kind of standard taxonomy we use to classify metadata. So for example, industry best practice typically organizes metadata around 3 broad categories: business, technical, and operational metadata. And if I got the question correctly, we were asked what of these standard taxonomy we use to classify metadata. So maybe Ben, you can give a very quick answer and then we go on.
So we actually don't use those topics, and we don't categorize the metadata we use or the metadata quality we use in those terms. So what you see on the portal and how it's presented follows what is usually done on open data portals from the public sector. But all those categories also considered in the data and the metadata quality. So for technical, we have this kind of, is this accessible and what is the format of the data provided? For organizational, we have this, the publication organization, for example. And for, what was the other?
We have business, technical, and operational metadata.
Sorry, operational, yeah. So this is information we don't have so much. One example of this, which is provided or sometimes is if we have translations. So Dataeuropa.eu has data sets stored in all available languages of the EU. And if there's a data set was translated by a machine, we, for example, store what translation mechanism was used and from which original language into which target language was translated. So this we do.
Thank you.
I believe then we can go on, right?
Yes.
Okay. So as we now learned about metadata data quality and how it's applied and measured on Data.europa.eu, we can deep dive a bit on the data quality guidelines, which also talks about data quality and metadata quality, but we will now focus more a bit on the data quality. But again, before we do so, a little introduction on what we did before that. So we were looking at 15,000 data sets from EU institutions. So by the time we did this, we had two portals. It was European Data Portal and it was the EU Open Data Portal, which currently now are merged to Data.europa.eu. When we did this on the EU Open Data Portal and only looked at about 15,000 data sets from EU institutions. So talking about data quality means we have also to look at the data sets. So at the real data, I mean, at the CSV files, the Excel files, JSON, XML, what else? And this is a manual process we did there. So you can maybe imagine that we don't have the capacity to look at 15,000 data sets. For doing so, we needed an automated mechanism to narrow down what we are looking at. And we did this with the assumption that if the metadata already is really bad, probably also the data quality has some issues. So what we did, we used a specialized version of the MQA to look on all those meta information. We created a score, and for the score, we selected a threshold for the points, for the score points, and we divided the data sets into data sets that are below the threshold and above the threshold. And we adjusted this threshold into something that is handleable, that we can look in the end at 50 data sets. And then we have this automated analysis on the left side, which we did with specialized MQA. And we have this manual data analysis where we really looked into the data, looked at the files and see what issues comes around there. And this was a bit of a basis for the examples we will give in the data quality guidelines. So we find a lot of results here, but I will only present one example of this. So what were the most occurrences of issues we found there? Going from bottom up, we see, for example, there are some UTF-8 encoding issues. We can already see, we looked at Excel files, for example, which have merged cells, which are basically very bad to use if you want to machine read this file. Then what is often found is that the data itself contains metadata as a header or a footer. We found only 7 data sets without any issues, and also 7 data sets that have special characters. And if you look further, we see that Excel sheets, for example, contains multiple table sheets, which is also not so easy to read then on a machine. And we have a lot of accessibility issues. And this is actually what we saw when the data is not accessible. So there's a 404 page telling me this data is not, I cannot find this data, or someone needed to register to sign up somewhere before the data could be downloaded. But in most cases, we got incorrect formatting. So incorrect formatting means that we have wrong decimal digits, or in a CSV file, so a comma separated file, we have wrong delimiters and so on. So these are all issues that makes it harder to read the data and to process the data on a machine readable on a machine and make added value out of it. So this as an introduction to the data quality guidelines, which can be now presented by Lina.
Thank you. Maybe you just click once again. Okay, this looks a bit weird. So there seem to be some technical issues. Ah, now it looks good. Okay, so the data quality guidelines we were already talking about today quite a lot. They are based on a project launched by the Publications Office of the European Union in 2019, sorry. And yeah, the aim was to first analyze major quality issues and then provide a set of recommendations for data providers in order to publish data in better quality. So this project consisted of 3 parts. First part was the data analysis, which was Ben shortly talking about. Then we had the identification of data quality dimension, indicators, and metrics. So the dimension and indicators I introduced to you in the first section this morning. The metrics we did not introduce to you. This would be quite a deep dive, but in the data quality guidelines, you can also find the metrics in the appendix. And yeah, the main part are the recommendation for delivering high quality data, which are actually the published data quality guidelines. So you can find them on this slide on the right-hand side. And also you see the link to the quality guidelines, so you can download them free of charge and just have a look into them. If you have any questions regarding this publication, or if you have any feedback, you can contact to the given mail address on this slide. Okay. So here again, our data preparation process, which I showed to you already earlier. Maybe Ben, you can click again. Then we can see what phases are covered by the data quality guidelines. So actually 4 of the 6 phases are covered in the guidelines. So we have one section about the enriching of data. And this is where I personally would also see that you apply metadata in this phase. This was also a question we had in Slido. So in this section, we explain to you standardization and enrichment of data, for example, by reusing unambiguous concepts from controlled vocabularies. Then we have a chapter on documenting. So we give recommendations on documenting data, on documenting their structure by using schemas, and also on documenting the meaning of data. And we also show how to document data changes. So the validating phase, there we have basically 2 sections. We have one section with general recommendations. So this would be recommendations on how to make your metadata findable, your data and metadata findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. But also we have 5 format-specific recommendations. So for example, we take into account CSV, XML, RDF, JSON, and APIs. And you will find dedicated section for these 5 formats and lots of recommendations, for example, how a good CSV file should look like. And then we have the publishing phase. For this, we have one section where we introduce the 5-star model of openness of Tim Berners-Lee, and we show how to achieve each level of this model. So these are the phases which are covered by the data quality guidelines. We have lots of examples, hands-on examples we found in the data portal we analyzed. We also provide helpful links and tools for further information and also for how to apply the recommendations. So yeah, just have a look at the data quality guidelines. You will find lots of helpful information there. So now we also would like to show to you some indicators in detail. Unfortunately, we do not have the time to go through each dimension in detail, but we want to give you a first impression of what you can learn in the data quality guidelines. So here are some examples for you. The first example is from the dimension findability. And as I already said at the very beginning, findability is depending on the metadata. So the better the data is described through metadata, the easier it is for users to find the data. So this is basically the definition. And now to the question how to improve the quality regarding the findability, there are some things you can do. You can first choose a precise title. So the title should be in a way that someone who does not know the data get a first impression of what to expect from the data. You should then assign keywords and categories used from controlled vocabularies, because keywords and categories are a good vehicle for data users to find specific data sets. And also you can add temporal information and spatial information, and quite important, a description, because again, the data user does not know the data the way you know it. So there needs to be a description in order to get more detailed what to expect from the data, how to read the data, for example, and how to understand the data. So as I was saying, we have lots of practical examples in the data quality guidelines, and we are now looking at some of them. So first, let's have a look at the recommendation of choosing a very precise title. So here we now see an example from Data.europa.eu. It's one data set, and please just have a look at the title. So the title is CPI, all households elaborate. So just have a look at the red highlighted area. So from what we see, this title is not of a good data quality because it contains an abbreviation, and maybe someone does not know what CPI stands for. And also it is totally unclear what all households means. So is it just from one district? Is it from country or whatever? So we simply don't know. So this would not be a very precise title. So let's have a look at the next example. So the next example, again, is not a very good title because it just says consumer price index. It is good in the sense that there is no abbreviation used, but still we have lots of questions. So we do not know what this consumer price index is basically about. So maybe the next example, this is a better example for a very precise title. And again, please just have a look at the title in this case. So it says consumer price index, so we have no abbreviation. And additionally, we get the information that it is located in Hamburg and it applies only to June 2019. So only from this title, I get a lot of information. It's about consumer price index in Hamburg, June 2019. So this would be quite a precise title without being too long. Okay, then let's have a look at how to provide a detailed description. The first example, and now you might notice this is the good example from the last slide with the nice title, Consumer Price Index Hamburg, June 2019. But now we are just looking at the description. And in this case, there's no description available. So from this point of view, we have a huge quality issue regarding, because there is no description. So only because it has a good title doesn't mean it's a totally good data set, because as we can see, there's no description given. The next example. Here we do have a description, but it does not deliver added value because it is the same as the title. So the description, it is there, that's a yes, but from a user perspective, I would actually accept more detailed information. Okay, and the next. So this is quite funny because this is the data set with the title where we just said in the slide before, this is not a good title, but therefore the description is quite good because it delivers some more information. So it tells us it's about index figures of consumer goods in 1996 to 2002. So this is where you can quite nicely see that data quality is a very broad topic with many different aspects, and usually data sets do score in one aspect maybe quite good, and in others they score a bit lower. But yeah, that's just how it is. So let's move on to the next. I was saying that it is good to assign categories, and you can see from this slide why it is good. So on the left, you can see all these categories. It's actually a screenshot from Data.europa.eu when I'm searching for a data set. So on the left-hand side in Data.europa.eu, when searching for a data set, I would get lots of different search functionalities, and one are the categories. So these are not all categories. It would have been a too long screenshot, so I had to cut it off a bit. But you can see that when searching for a data set, I can say, I only want to search for environmental data. So those data sets which have the category environment. And then I get only the 262,701 data sets, which are labeled for this category. Okay, next.
So there was already a question for how to see that how the metrics or indicators are measured. So what we see here is taken from the MQA methodology for the dimension of findability, and these are all indicators we use for this dimension. And we can see if a keyword is used, this will have a weight of 30, so you will get 30 points if you have keywords assigned, or category, so a data theme is used. Or as I already said, if there's spatial data available on the data set. So this is not the complete table. There is additional information to be found on the methodology, but this gives you an impression on how the points are calculated together. So as I said, this is a perspective of Data.europa.eu on data quality, metadata quality that is provided by the data providers. And this is how we see this. When we first created the MQA, I believe this was back at 2015 in the European Data Portal, we also did some literary research and find there few weights for the dimension, and then we came up with the weights for the individual indicators to match those overall picture of weights for metadata quality. And you can find such a table for each dimension on the methodology page. So it's very transparent, and you can see what you would need to do to get a better ranking or a better score on the MQA. But now we can move on with the dimension and examples of the dimension interoperability.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. So first we start with a definition of interoperability. So basically your data is interoperable if it can be easily retrieved, processed, reused, and operated by others. So what do you have to do? Ben, maybe you can click. And again, this looks a bit weird. Okay, thank you. So to improve the quality regarding the interoperability, you should make your data dkdap compliant. So we already learned from before what dkdap is. So in order for your data to appear in Data.europa.eu, it has to be dkdap compliant. Then you should also consider standards, for example, for date and times. There are ISO standards, and also for formats, for file formats, but we will see this later on in one example. You should also consider the conformity of your license, and you should use machine readable and open formats. So for example, if you use a proprietary format, a potential data user might later on not be able to reuse your data because he does not have the proprietary program in order to open your file. And you should use controlled vocabularies wherever possible. Let's have a look at the examples. So first, one example for considering standards. It's a bad example here because in the title we do have temporal information, which is what we learned from before, quite good. But the way this date is given can be quite confusing because depending on the countries, there are different ways on how to state dates. And here you do not, one cannot clearly say what order it is. Is it day, month, year, or is it month, day, year? So a better way would be to consider the ISO standard for dates. Maybe Ben, you can click. Okay. So here we have one better example where the date follows the ISO standard. And in the description, you can also see that they give information about the time zone. So it's UTC, the Universal Time Coordinated. And yeah, it is quite clear that the order is year, month, date. So this would be just better in order to avoid confusion about dates. So the next example is still about considering standards. And I was already saying that standards do also apply to file formats, because what you can see here is, again, a screenshot from Data.europa.eu. It's from the left-hand side. When I'm searching for a data set, I have the possibility to say what kind of formats I would like to see. So this is a long list. I had to cut it in order to bring it all on this slide. And then if you just click again, we can see the issue with this list, because Excel, so XLSX files are here 3 times, but each time a different naming is used. So this is not a problem of Data.europa.eu. As you know, this is a metadata portal harvesting national-wide portals. And if a data provider just says, well, my file is Excel XLSX, then this will be shown here as Excel XLSX. A better way would be to consider the IANA list. This is also linked in the data quality guidelines. It's a list where all file formats are listed, and there you can also see the name of the file. So XLSX in the green box would be basically the way how to state or how to name this specific file format. And then if everyone would consider this standard, the Excel XLSX would only appear once in this list and not 3 times. Okay, then an example for the usage of open and machine readable formats. So in terms of open data, you should just publish your data in machine readable format and in open format, so it can be easily reused, automatically processed by data users. So let's have a look at the examples. Here's a bad example because the distribution for this data set is only provided in PDF. And PDF, it's a human-friendly format, so we can all easily open it and read it. But if we consider that we are a data user who wants to automatically process the data, this would not be possible with PDF. So a better example is to provide your files in, to provide your data in different files. So again, we have the PDF. You should keep in mind that when publishing data, you never know what use case the data users will have. So maybe they just want to open it and read it. So it would be good to provide it in PDF. But from an open data perspective, you should definitely provide it also in a machine readable and open format. And for this, we have here the provision in CSV. So providing your data in different formats is always a good idea, as long as one format is open and machine readable, for example, like CSV. Okay.
Okay, so yeah, I'm sorry about this technical issues. It happens when I unmute my microphone during the session. So again, for this interoperability MQA scoring, we see here the list of the methodology page, how the interoperability dimension is built up with the indicators and the weights to it. You can, for example, see that the dkdap compliance at the bottom is ranked the highest for this interoperability dimension. And that also machine readable, non-proprietary formats and so on is very positively seen. Also the format. What you should know about the MQA and the measurement there is you do not need to achieve 100% of points to be an excellent, to get an excellent. So it's good to have a good range or to receive a high points, but it does not need to be 100%. So you can have some little mistakes and issues there, and also in order to be good or excellent. So this, so to say, concludes what we have to say about the data quality guidelines. And now it's again time for questions. After that, we will have a recap. So if you have any questions, please ask us now. It can be everything about what we've learned or what we displayed or showed you today about data and metadata quality.
We already have one question in the chat. In terms of metadata quality, would a PDF fail because it does not conform to accessibility requirements? Well, basically, yes, it would fail. PDF is not a good way. And also it would score a lower ranking in the MQA because it's not machine readable. So this is what was shown on the last slide. I think machine readability was weighed with 30 points or something.
Yeah, it was 20 points. So just one more word on this. You do not get lower points if you have a distribution that has PDF attached. What we consider is there at least one distribution attached to a data set, at least one that has a machine readable format. So if you have a PDF and a CSV, this is all fine.
But the bad example we just showed where only one PDF was provided, this would get a lower ranking. Okay, then in Slido, we have another question. For improving data quality, once a data set has been published, wouldn't it be relevant to collect the feedback from the reusers and publish it in the portal? So Ben, do you want to say something?
Would be interesting, but actually this is a question I would like to forward also to the publications office if they might want to answer. So at least what we can say, getting feedback is always good. And we also will ask you for feedback at the end of the session. So feedback will help us to improve. The thing is, we are not the data providers in many cases. So we can would be able to collect this information and hand this over. But we are not the persons organization who is improving the data quality. We just can present what the data quality is.
But anyway, it is always a good idea if the data provider hands out to the data users and asks for feedback and maybe ask whether there are issues with the data quality, whether they would need something else, maybe they need additional data or something. So it's always a good idea to hand out to the data users and collect their feedback. So then there is one statement: to avoid discrepancies in format naming and similar issues, code lists could be used when collecting metadata. So yes, but I think that's something in the national portal which has to be implemented. Or what do you think, Ben?
Yeah, you're right.
One question is, do you have quality assurance for data similarly to the MQA for the metadata?
No, not yet. Stay tuned.
Another question about data quality. Do you consider the intrinsic quality of the data itself? Do you run validation routine? I think it's quite the same question like before, right?
Yeah, it is. So not yet. There's something on the plans for Data.europa.eu.
And from the Teams chat, there is another question. So is there an incentive for a PDF publisher to convert it to an appropriate format? Otherwise, bad habits persist. So sure, if you want to score a better ranking, you should avoid publishing PDFs. And if you want your data to be reused, you should also provide it in machine readable formats. So what we often see are PDF publications which consist of, for example, different tables. And it would be a good idea to publish the raw data used for these tables, for example, in a CSV file. So then the data would be reusable for external data users, but also within your organization, you make your data reusable. So this is a very good idea to publish your data in open and machine readable formats and not only in PDF. So then we had a question from at the beginning, what would be the criteria for a good quality metadata? I think this we answered during the training. So there are many different criteria for good quality metadata. We saw that metadata is good for findability. So please provide a title, a description, assign keywords and categories. And also you will find some more indicators in the data quality guidelines for metadata. So having a look at the time, I think we should go on to the summary. So what we did today, we introduced you to data quality. We showed you some dimension and indicators we used for writing the data quality guidelines. We showed you that data quality concerns data and metadata as well. And it's always a question of fitness for use. So it's somehow subjective, depending on the use case of the data user. And we also introduced you to the data preparation process and its different phases. We then had our second section on how metadata quality can be determined on Data.europa.eu, how the scoring works, and we also showed you where to find the metadata quality section, so where you can see the results on your own datasets. And in this last section, we showed you how to improve data quality. And I think what is the most important from today, we introduced you to the data quality guidelines. You now have the link and you know where to find it. So you can have a look at it and hopefully gain a lot of knowledge on how to make your data and metadata of better quality. So to wrap up this session, we would ask you again to go on Slido and please add one line or word about something you learned in this session, or something you found interesting, or you would like to add or share today. So I just opened the poll. You have to switch the tab again and go to polls, and there you can enter one word or line on leaving. So something you learned, something you found interesting, or something you would like to add or share. Thank you. And while you are typing, maybe one interesting question then you can answer. I just read it out loud. Is the MQA ranking a tool to increase dataset visibility in the portal? So do you make a dataset more visible if the ranking is high?
No, not by default. So if you go on the search page, all datasets can be found equally. But there's a facet on the left side of the search page where you can select you want only see excellent ranked data sets, or only good data sets and excellent data sets, or only bad data sets, or sufficient and ranked higher. So you can configure this, but the default is that everything is find equally. Also, if you select a filter of those quality score, you will get a disclaimer that your current search is narrowed down by a quality score, and just to remember you that you might not see all data sets.
Okay, thanks. So we are getting a lot of answers, so words or lines on leaving, and yeah, someone said they learned about the very valuable work being done by the portal, analyzing and publicly sharing the metadata quality of data sets. That's cool.
Thanks a lot.
Someone learned how to qualify data and measure the quality. That's also good. The MQA score per dataset was new for someone, and the examples were found very useful. That's really nice. We're happy. And a very nice one, anyone can increase quality, whatever he, she is beginner or expert. Yeah, I would totally agree. So you can always do something in order to increase your quality. Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you for participating. And I think we now have the QR code.
Yes, before you leave, please give us some feedback. So we would like to see what you think about this course. And of course, very important to us, how can we improve the trainings of Dataeuropa Academy? Of course, you will also get the slides, and there the QR code is included. Okay, I believe we can then close now. So again, if you want to send us any feedback, use the QR code, or if you have anything else, there's an email address you can send whatever you want about the Academy and the metadata quality, and we will somehow respond. Laura, what is the process in closing up this? Saying goodbye?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Goodbye.
This is it. Thanks Benjamin and Lina, for this very fruitful training session. I believe we can tell from the last lines on leaving that it has been perceived quite well. And I also would like to thank all of the participants today for their very enthusiastic interaction during the session. Wishing you all a very nice afternoon.